Welcome to The Concise Consultant. This series of short lecturettes covers some of the main skills needed to work effectively as a management consultant. Hello, my name is Calvert Markham. I'm a management consultant, but for much of my career I've designed and delivered training and consulting skills for individuals and organizations around the world. As part of this work, some years ago I recorded a series of interviews with the broadcaster Michael Bartlett on various topics in consultancy. We called it The Concise Consultant. I've now added some graphics to these interviews. We cover 4 topics. Consultancy and dealing with clients, in which we look at the context in which consultancy is performed. How to deliver consultancy services, which is at the core of a consultant's work. Selling consultancy services, which is essential for anyone working in a consulting practice. And managing the consultancy business, which looks at some of the peculiar challenges involved. This is the 4th of the series and deals with managing the consultancy business. Consultancy firms are businesses and so need to be managed as such. However, a lot of consultants don't like to be managed, and many entered their profession to practice their skills, not to be managers. So there are peculiar problems in managing a consulting business. I hope you enjoy this lecturette and find it useful. Now over to Michael Bartlett.
Calvert, what sorts of consultancy business are there?
Well, I mentioned at the start that there were 3 types of consultancy business that we identified: the internal consultant, the emergent consultant, and the mainstream consultant. And under this heading of managing a consultancy business, I'm going to be directing my remarks, I think, mainly to the 3rd type of business, the commercial, profit-making enterprise devoted to consultancy. Although, of course, a lot of the messages actually are appropriate for internal and emergent consultancies. But within this mainstream area, there are again 3 types of business. There's the global consultancy practice, which may have thousands of consultants. There's the sole practitioner, the individual who's working on his or her own as a consultant. And then there's all stages in between. I suppose there's also another area, which is the networked firm, which may consist of a number of different organizations or individuals who come together to conduct consultancy on behalf of clients. My remarks really are going to be about numbers of consultants rather than just simply sole practitioners.
So what are the peculiar problems associated with managing a consultancy business?
They come into 4 areas. First is, how do we win business with clients, selling, and we've already talked about that. How to manage people and the resources of consultancy. There's the whole question of infrastructure, which includes leadership, intellectual property management, and so on. And finally, there's financial structure.
Financial structure seems an interesting point. What's its significance?
If you think about a consultancy, most of its costs are fixed. It's going to be property, people. And consultants themselves are faced with a make or buy decision. Do we actually own the individuals in terms of being employees who provide consultancy services? Do we own our premises, and so on? And of course, if you're going to have a stable business, if you have fixed costs which are too high, then of course the moment sales turn down, then you've got to think of a way of reducing costs. And if you've got fixed costs, that's a bit more difficult than if you've got variable costs. So the question is, how do we make our costs a bit more variable as a consultancy practice? And there are a couple of traditional ways of doing that. One is by taking on associates, so that if times get hard, then you can drop the associates. Or you can make pay variable as well, for example, by introducing some sort of bonus scheme, so that pay goes up when times are good, but it goes down when times are hard.
So how does a consultancy attract and keep talented people?
This is a very important question, because in my view, the competition for talent is as tough as it is for clients. And even when the market is difficult for consultancies, it's still just as difficult to get hold of talented people. And it's quite useful, in my view, I think, to apply some of the lessons of marketing to the business of acquiring and retaining talent. Now, there's a couple of matters of policy here for a consultancy practice. One is, if you like, the circuit board strategy, which simply says we invest nothing in our people. What we do is we buy talent off the street, we put it into our firm, and what happens is they then earn fees on our behalf, and what happens is that when they cease to be of any more use to us or they get tired of us, then they disappear off. That's the circuit board philosophy. And I would call that a sort of franchise operation. All you're giving people is a business card with the name of your firm on it. Now, there are not many organizations that fit into that category, and that's probably an extreme. But there are some that veer towards it, and it is actually a viable strategy. But it can be costly. So, for example, you might have to pay more than market rate in order to be able to attract people. The other extreme is actually to invest quite heavily in your people, and so their interest in staying with you is because they're getting added value to their CV. One of the peculiarities of consultancy is that you as an individual can become redundant. In most organizations, it's jobs that become redundant, but in consultancy, you personally can become redundant. And so it's in every consultant's interest to keep their CV bright and shiny. In other words, they've got to be acquiring experience and developing their skills during the course of their work. And if this isn't done to any great extent, so if, for example, a consultancy practice offers no training at all to its consultants, then the individuals will feel that they're not getting particular added value to their CV. So on the one hand, you've got the circuit board philosophy, which says we invest nothing in our consultants, but we pay quite a lot for them. In the other extreme, you've got the added value model, which says we may not pay our consultants a lot, but we invest a lot in them through training and development. And you have to think about a strategy that may combine elements of those two things. What does seem to be clear is that consultants are going to be more interested in those organizations which allow them to grow and develop.
You also mentioned infrastructure.
Yes. I mean, why should consultants come together in an organization at all? What are the benefits of so doing? And there must be some synergy there. One of the key questions, I guess, for any consultancy organization is how do we get the knowledge out of the head of the individual consultant and make it corporately available? It's avoiding the goldfish bowl mentality that I talked about earlier. And to that end, we do need to have procedures in place within the organization that encourage people to share knowledge, and often that might be also supported by IT software of one kind or another. We've got to remember, of course, that consultancies are actually trading in knowledge and know-how. We need also to think about how we as a consultancy practice conduct consultancy projects. And particularly if you've got teams of consultants who have different specialist skills, how do we get them to work together effectively? If they've all got different operating methodologies, then there can be quite a lot of work in reconciling those. And so another area of infrastructure is how do we achieve a plug-and-play capability between our consultants? So you can draw someone from, let's say, England and another person from Argentina, and the two can quite readily work together because they're used to working to the same methodology or standard. And that in large consultancy practices can be an important element of infrastructure.
What about the eternal problem of managing people?
Well, here there can be great difficulties in a consultancy practice because if you think about the quality that you're seeking from your consultants when they're working with clients, you're looking for a quality of independence of mind, thought and action. Yet when they're working within the framework of your own consultancy practice, you do want them to conform to some extent. So the ideal individual is that impossible person, the conforming individualist. And of course, not surprisingly, consultants do tend to be individualists, and the problems of managing consultants has often been compared with that of herding cats. I suppose if there was a management style that's appropriate for managing consultants is what I would call enlightened unreasonableness. The enlightened bit is consulting with them beforehand, and the unreasonable bit comes because all of them will have different views about what you ought to do. And ultimately, you have to take a decision and move ahead. There's another important aspect in thinking about managing consultants, and that arises from the different tasks that they carry out. They may have, as well as their specialist tasks, tasks of selling, some tasks of administration. and their willingness, their ability, their confidence at doing these different tasks may be different. And you may need different management processes for supervising them in carrying out these tasks. So, for example, the person who is the world expert on a particular specialist topic may need no supervision whatsoever when dealing with a client. But put them into a sales role, they may need a lot more support and supervision from their consultant manager.
That completes this session on managing the consultancy business. Here's what we covered. Who provides consultancy? Elements in managing a consultancy business. Attracting and retaining consultants. Infrastructure. And managing consultants. In this short session, we have only touched on these topics. If you want to know more, you may like to take a look at some of my other publications or at further training. I'll be giving details on each of these in a moment, but on the topic of managing the consultancy business, you'll find that the top consultant and management consultancy cover much that is relevant. Practical management consultancy should be really helpful to those who are recent recruits to management consultancy, as well as a useful refresher to more experienced consultants who want to revisit the basics. The core of the book is a detailed treatment of the consultancy delivery process, which I have called the consult process, and which consists of 5 stages. Entry, in which you establish a relationship with a client. Contracting, agreeing what you're going to do and how you do it. Diagnosis, in which you gather information and work out how the client's situation is to be addressed. Intervention, where you work with the client to put your solutions in place. And closure, completion of the project and withdrawal. This is supported by chapters on the supporting techniques that consultants need in their tool bag. For example, report writing and problem solving. Finally, there are chapters on contextual matters, commercial aspects, and working in a consulting practice. The top consultant addresses the skills required of more experienced management consultants and has a more commercial edge than practical management consultancy, covering, for example, managing a consultancy business, product definition and marketing in consultancy, the consultancy sales process, consultancy problem solving, and commercial aspects of consultancy. Joe Omani wrote the first edition of Management Consultancy in 2010. Over the many years I've been teaching consultants and students, this is by far the best critical examination of management consultancy and the various aspects of it. It is a truly excellent book for students of the subject. I therefore had no hesitation in making this the set book for the courses I've run at MSc and MBA levels. I was therefore delighted when Joe asked me to contribute to the second edition in 2013. I added only a little to what was already a very comprehensive book, but Joe's been kind enough to cite me as the second author. There are 4 perspectives covered in the book. Descriptive, outlining what consultancy is and its business. Practitioner, setting out the practicalities of delivering consultancy and the commercial aspects of it. Critical, setting out the challenges for institutions and individuals in consultancy. And career, which is of interest to the many students who are considering the possibility of becoming a management consultant. All these books are available on Amazon. In a different medium, you may like to take a look at Henry Stewart Talks, which are in a format similar to the one you've just seen. The series on management consultancy contains a number of lectures by academics on contemporary issues. I've contributed one on the consulting project cycle. Finally, there are lots of training courses available for consultants, and so it would be remiss of me not to refer you to those run by the company that I founded, now called Elevation Learning. Their suite of courses includes core skill programs, covering the essential skills needed in any consultancy business, in-depth skills for consultants going beyond the core skills, developing competence in aspects of the consulting process, working with clients, and commercial skills. And finally, managers may find themselves thrust into a consulting role as internal consultants, or technical specialists such as engineers may need consulting skills to work effectively with clients. Internal service deliverers such as HR and IT need these skills if they are to provide excellent service to their in-house clients. Courses in engagement skills for technical specialists and internal consultants will help them to perform well in all these roles. You can see all these courses and others on the Elevation Learning website. There are, of course, many other resources available to both beginners in consultancy and experienced practitioners. Thank you for your attention.